In the mid to late 2000s, Doctor Who was really at its peak in the UK. And while it could be argued that it didn't really reach international success until the Matt Smith era, there was a period of time between 2006 and 2010 where, if you lived in the UK, Doctor Who was absolutely everywhere. With almost Kiss-level amounts of merchandise, there wasn't a boy, girl or sweaty awkward teenager who didn't own something Who-related. And the BBC at the time was more than happy to just slap a licence on something and shove it out the door to keep the bank full and help keep the wheels turning. However, it wasn't just the BBC churning out merchandise. Less scrupulous companies would quite frequently bootleg merchandise with the aim to turn a profit, and any video company or production house who was willing to chance it was more than eager to get a slice of the pie for themselves. That's how I arrived at today's review subject, Doctor Who The Lost Interviews. That's Doctor, not Doctor, for reasons I'll explain shortly. It was a 2009 direct-to-DVD production, written, curated and edited by Neil Sean. Sean was, for quite a long time, a showbiz columnist for the newspaper Metro, before making the jump to the world of Poundland DVDs, churning out about half a dozen DVDs that skirt UK copyright law by tweaking the name of the show they're covering ever so slightly, hence why it's the incorrect spelling of Doctor. And they consist of dog ends of interviews that Sean's conducted with the then cast of Doctor Who over a period of a few years, intercut with Sean appearing as a host, introducing clips and some other additional cutaway material. In effect, this is heavily reminiscent of those celebrity gossip VHS tapes that they used to sell in the 90s, such as Hangin' with Leo or Corey Haim's Me, Myself and I. They basically exist to cater to a very specific demographic, and wear the term documentary so loose that it's basically hanging around their ankles. Neil Sean himself actually got into a bit of trouble with this in 2014, when comedian and general good egg Dave Gorman called Sean out on his style of presenting during a segment of his TV show Modern Life is Good-ish. Sean responded in a quite frankly bizarre manner, which is documented over on Gorman's website. Please check the link in the description, I assure you it's totally bizarre. Strangely, Neil Sean doesn't list this film on his IMDb page, but simply popping the DVD into the machine reveals quite possibly why he's decided to gloss over this one.
Is anybody out there? Is anybody out there?
With a menu like this, I knew I was going to be in for a good time. It screams irritating like nothing I've ever really seen before. In fact, for a brief moment I thought my DVD's audio was broken, till I realised, no, it actually sounds like this. Also, I have no idea why Mr. Bean is featured on this DVD menu, nor can I explain why he's featured halfway through the main feature either. The DVD opens with a very poorly mocked up shot of bombed out London, with a spaceship flying overhead, which is a direct reference to the Dalek invasion of Earth, a 1965 serial starring William Hartnell's Doctor, that has literally no place being on this DVD. Now, bearing in mind this production is targeted at new Who fans and contains no interviews or even moving footage of any of the actors to play the Doctor on screen before 2006, why they've chosen to use this particular reference and this particular shot to open their DVD, I honestly don't know. There's also a shot of 2 crumpled Daleks with flashing text that appears randomly as well. These 2 clips are featured constantly, and I mean constantly, throughout the 40-minute runtime. There's no thought in the editing that's occurred here. It really feels like Neil Sean just put a load of footage from YouTube into Windows Movie Maker, stuck it together, realised it only ran to about 25 minutes or so, and then he decided to download a load more random stuff to pad the ever-loving crap out of it. I feel bad for saying that this is even edited, really, because to do so implies it's somewhat competent. It really isn't. None of the footage is in a correct aspect ratio. Some of the interviewee clips are strained at best, with an absolute highlight being Claire Bloom, who doesn't even talk about Doctor Who in her interview, and clips from more interesting interviews being used 2 or 3 times each. He must have literally had a 4-minute long clip of David Tennant, which he plays in full twice, and an interview with Russell T Davies he plays a couple of times as well. Oh, I should also point out that these interviews are incredibly informal and aren't filmed for this DVD. Rather, they're offcuts of bigger interviews that got used for proper telly. So effectively, this is the kind of quality that even the cheapo TV channels turn down, and it's on a par with a bloke with a microphone waiting on a street corner to pop out and ask a celebrity a question. For the record, Russell's interview is the best in terms of content, but it's way too short to be memorable, and it doesn't help either that Neil introduces the clip by calling Russell the creator of Doctor Who 2010, which is just not right. Not in any sense, really. Neil does, however, get a pretty decent interview from John Barrowman, who talks quite heavily about LGBTQ issues and about potentially starting his own comic series, something he'd actually go on to do a few years later. Again, the interview isn't majorly memorable, but if you're looking for positives, there's always that. If you want further clarification as to just how awful these interviews are, there's an interview with Simon Pegg where they purposely mangle the footage in the last few seconds because I assume either there was some fault with the tape or somebody hadn't signed a waiver to let their footage be used. Also padding out these interviews are Doctor Who Fast Facts, a selection of trivia and information about the show. Again, mostly about the classic series, weirdly. And I'd like to take a moment to just very quickly run through them to test for accuracy. Yeah, not ideal. One of the biggest sins this DVD commits is that a decent chunk of its content is purely anecdotal recallings from Sean himself, which more often than not are very boring or bland recollections that have absolutely no evidence to suggest that they ever actually happened. Like a story he tells of bumping into Freema Agyeman, probably better known as Martha Jones, the Doctor's assistant from Season 3, outside of a branch of Marks and Spencer's. He claims Freema told him she wanted to be the first female Doctor. The whole recollection comes off as a little bit predatory. To top it off, I'm going to run through a few other points that really bothered me about this. Firstly, they constantly show images of the first, second and third Doctor, even though there's absolutely no mention of them on this film apart from a fleeting excerpt where the audience is asked to name as many Doctors as they can. Tom Baker is notable by his absence, as all the classic series Doctors get shown in one form or another over the 40-minute runtime, even if they aren't talked about. Throughout the feature, they always write it Doctor, until the very end of the disc when for some reason they decide to write a caption welcoming Matt Smith by saying, "He is the youngest Doctor Who ever." Which, apart from breaking the branding and sounding like it was written by a 5-year-old, is doubly upsetting because unless you believe the War Machine's theory that the Doctor's actual name is Doctor Who, it's terribly incorrect to call him that. They also thank Marks and Spencer's for selling Neil clothes to wear on the DVD, which would be a bit like me thanking Matalan for selling me the shorts I'm wearing while I'm recording this. They also end the DVD by having Sean say, "And you can only buy this DVD here in store," which, apart from being wrong because I got this copy on eBay sealed and brand new, I can't honestly think what shop decided to go all in on this 40-minute semi-failure of a documentary. I can only assume it's now no longer in business. Finally, he calls the 1981 Liz Sladen John Leeson spin-off Canine and Company Canine and Friends, which is just lazy. Do another take or do some research, please. He also refers to the live-action Thunderbirds movie as a turkey. I mean, I'll get to that one in good time, believe you me, but calling that a turkey when this is your product is double standards at best. Finally, even the box art isn't grammatically accurate, as he refers to his interview with John Barrowman as starring Torchwood own Captain Jack. Which, I mean, I'm not a pedant, but, well, you get the idea. This review has been one of the hardest I've ever had to write. Not because it was difficult to put into words just how much of an abomination this piece of crap DVD was. No, that's easy. It was actually trying to explain to you just how incoherent this was without literally just playing the whole thing. This was a total mess of a low-budget production that pads out its runtime as much as it feels it can do, and relies on anecdotes and loose clips to try and cash in on a TV show at its peak. I don't even think this was checked for errors, as quite a few times there are errors in the editing. Shots randomly cutting, long pauses, text fading up and down without any warning, and interviews that are incoherently structured and barely intelligible, let alone insightful. I had to keep reminding myself that this cost money, actual money that I paid. He had the balls to try and put this in shops. In just trimming the footage to fit this review, I've done a better job than the effort that was done on the actual DVD. This is what happens when a project has no director, no budget and no vision. I'd tell you to avoid it like the plague, but to be honest, it's actually quite hard to get a hold of these days. So rather mercifully, you may have been spared a travesty. This somehow managed to piss off the Doctor Who fan on the inside and the grumpy film editor on the outside of me at the same time. Avoid it at all costs, because honestly, it'll only annoy the people who care.